Access Control Manager software divides identities into operators and cardholders. As previously mentioned, operators are identities that monitor or administer the system, while cardholders are identities that move throughout the space using their token, which is usually an access card. The system uses permissions to determine which doors or floors cardholders can enter and which they cannot. Permissions can also be used to control what features operators can utilize or configure on the system. This chapter introduces you to these two types of permissions, which are physical permissions and logical permissions. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to distinguish between the physical permissions and logical permissions on the system. As previously discussed, a role acts as a container for all the permissions that an identity would need to perform a specific task in an area. Before we discuss roles in more depth, let's explore the two main types of permissions on the system that a role can contain: physical permissions and logical permissions. Physical permissions, which are bundled together into what is called access groups, define which areas, doors, or floors a cardholder or identity may physically access. For example, this cardholder has been assigned Access Group A, which permits them to gain entry to the first 3 floors of the building. However, the identity over here has been assigned Access Group B, which permits them entry to all the floors of the building, as well as the rooftop. Logical permissions define which features operators have access to on the system. These permissions are grouped together in sets called delegations. For example, this operator has been assigned Delegation A, which permits them to view identities and monitor alarms or events. However, this other operator has been assigned Delegation B, which permits them additional abilities, such as editing identities and configuring hardware devices. Together, physical and logical permissions can be bundled into a role. Roles make it easier to assign or remove permissions to and from different cardholders. For example, Stephen has been assigned the monitoring role. The monitoring role contains Access Group A and Delegation A, which allows Stephen to access the server room only to monitor the alarms and events. On the other hand, Gail has been assigned the admin role, which contains Access Group B and Delegation B permissions. These permissions allow her to access all floors and doors, as well as edit identities and configure the system, in addition to monitoring alarms and events. If Gail is away, Stephen can easily manage her responsibilities by being assigned the admin role. When she returns, his identity can be reassigned to the monitoring role once more. To sum up, the system uses permissions to determine which doors or floors cardholders are permitted to enter and which features on the system are available to operators. These permissions are called physical permissions and logical permissions, respectively. Physical permissions can be bundled into groups called access groups, while logical permissions are gathered in sets called delegations. Access groups and delegations make it easier to assign a combination of permissions to roles, which can then be assigned to individual cardholders.